need to bring a way to a good conclusion and to make the journey successfully. So ways is tied to that. He wants all things in your life to be a good path, success, good conclusions, and easy to travel through. But that phrase, just as, is a word that marks similarity of events and states. It's literally to the same degree. So what he's saying is the prosperity in all things in your life will be to the degree that your soul's prosperous. Okay? So if you want to know why you're not prospering in an area, you need to look inward, not upward, not outward. You need to look inward and see what part of the soul is actually sabotaging the plan for your life. Does that make sense? So it's to the same degree. It's a comparison of two objects that are in the same degree of similarity. John is saying your journey will be successful, good, and easy to the degree that your soul is successful, good, and easy. And you know how to know when your soul's not successful, good, and easy? Number one, there's usually lack, but number two, you're just mad. You're just mad. You know, just mad. Not only is your current life condition due to your decrees, but it's predominantly due to the current state of your soul. Want to change your situation? Work on your soul. Now, soul in the Greek is the seat of the senses, desires, affections, appetites, passions, and a lower aspect of one's nature. That's why it's so susceptible to sin. So the lower aspect of our nature is what needs to be renewed. And then, promise fulfilled is divine nature shared. The faster we submit to the process of preparation, the faster we walk in our promises. Remember that these good things occur in degrees, meaning that he'll get one layer of a soul problem peeled away, and then you'll walk in that, and then he'll revisit that area and take another layer off. Okay? So he works in layers. He thinks in cycles, not linear. Okay, that's how God thinks. All right. So, I mean, so far good news. All hell breaks loose and you find out how jacked up you are. Number 3.
Well, it's good news because we are not alone, and and there's a solution.
And I think we're jacked up spuds. And I think that we can all think back in our lives where we've gone through this process, and maybe you've even wondered, what the heck was that? You know, now you know. Or maybe you knew that was kind of process. I'm just giving you words to formulate it. Okay, so let's get ready for this next section. We're going to go to Exodus chapter 14. And we got good news. It's time to leave the wilderness. Okay? So number 3, God guided you out of bondage into the wilderness. What? All right, here we go. But you'll see again more soul work occurring. Because now you have to be prepared for the battle or the battles. So the wilderness is where you've made the initial changes to habits and thought processes, etc., that kept you in bondage. But now he wants to do a deeper work of trust. Deeper work of trust. You have to trust him because you cannot think he doesn't have your back if you're fighting demons. Okay? So you got to know he's got your back. And that's where he's going to do a deeper work of trust. He knows that you can't win the battle for the promised land until you first win the battle of trust. Because in the possession of the promise comes the greatest conflict. The possession of the promise. I need you to hear that. When you get the possession of the promise, the greatest conflict comes. See, we think possession of the promise means sit back, you know, drink your mojito or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't even know what that is. And, you know, lounge by your pool. Nope. No, 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 no. Yes, that's why they lose their healing. Because the enemy always tests it. Always. That's why I tell everybody, you will have false symptoms, right? That's what we do. Your body will be attacked with false symptoms. But everything from this point on is false. And the reason you will be hit with false symptoms is the enemy wants you to believe the lie that you weren't healed. Okay? All right. So, it's in the promised land that you encounter giants. And it's during this time that you learn authority and you learn how to fight the enemy. It's during this time that you see God fight your battles. And it's during this time that you see Him do crazy, outrageous things on your behalf that others also see. It's also a time of increased intimacy and care from the Father. So let's look at Exodus 1 through 4. Now the Lord... 14, I'm sorry. Yeah, 14, 1 through 4. Now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before something to do with Pi, between Migdol and the sea, opposite Baal Zephon, and you shall camp before it by the sea. Now who's giving them directions here? Father. Okay. For Pharaoh, why? Why does he want them to get trapped? For Pharaoh will say, the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land, the wilderness has closed them in. Because it's not a strategic military advantage to be next to the water. Then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, and I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Now, I don't know if Moses told the people, okay, here's the game plan. You ready? Sure, Moses. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to make ourselves bait, and we're going to go over here to this sea, and we're going to camp out, and then the enemy is going to pursue us, and we're going to be surrounded. Oh, well then what's the next plan? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, I doubt that's how the conversation went. I'm pretty sure he said, let's go that way. Okay. Because they've just seen all the plagues, you know, all that stuff. They're saying, we're free, we're free, we're free. And then the Egyptians are like, what are they doing? Don't they know that you know, they're like, oh, well, let's get our army. We're gonna destroy them. See, so, you know, I doubt he told them the full plan. The Lord won't tell you the full plan either. You'll come up to a sea, and you're like, how in the H-E double hockey sticks did I get here? I must not have heard God. How many people do that? God says do this. Oh, I must not have heard Him. Because if I would have heard Him, I wouldn't be in this position. No, you are in that position because you did hear Him. So now it's time to take what's in your hand and part the impossible. Okay? So stop saying, why did God bring me here or do this for this to happen? And stop questioning whether you heard Him when things look crazy. Now, is there a potential chance that you didn't hear Him? Possibly, possibly. But again, the external circumstance is not evidence of your ability to hear Him. We're looking too much out. Do you see what I mean? We're looking out to determine our relationship and ability to hear instead of inward. Okay? All right. So the Father led them to the Red Sea, where the impossibility of God had to show up. It tricked the enemy into his own defeat, just as He did by crucifying the Lord. And a nation learned that God is Lord. On the digging ditches, you know, the rest of the story is they dug the ditches, the water showed up. The enemy thought that the Israelites killed themselves because the water looked like blood. And so the enemy went over there, and then the Israelites ambushed them and killed their enemies. So the digging ditches, the water going in was a trick to get the enemy to fall into a trap. Isn't that neat? You said 2 Kings 3?
Yes, 3.
Yeah, I'd read that chapter. It's very interesting. Okay, so verses 15 through 18. Let's see what happens here. So everybody's crying, you know, why'd God bring us out here? There were no graves in Egypt. Is that why? All right, so then he goes, the Lord will fight for you and you hold your peace, verse 14. So then 15, well, actually, let's go back. This is funny. So look at verse 13. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which He will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians who you seem to see today, you shall again no more see after. Okay, so that's his pronouncement, right? He says, the Lord will fight for you and you will hold your peace. Then verse 15, and the Lord said to Moses, why do you cry to me? I bet even Moses is like, hey, did I, you know, make a wrong turn somewhere? Tell the children of Israel to go forward, but lift up your rod, stretch out your hand over the sea, and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they will follow him. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. Then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. Let's just go ahead and read 19. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and then also stood behind them. So they were actually camped out there for a few days. So in the day, the cloud would cover them and protect them from the vision of the Egyptians, and then at night he would move behind them, and all they saw was fire. So the Lord hid them from the enemy. But do you notice he wasn't concerned with them knowing he was God? That should have been, you know, a given, but it wasn't. He wanted the Egyptians to know that he's God. Okay? So God will show up and show off. Okay, so this is not the time to cry. This is not the time to feel sorry for yourself. This is not the time, you know, to do any of that. It's the time to take your authority. That's the rod. And speak. Use it to divide the sea of impossibility. You're ready, but you don't know that you are. So that's what he's trying to do. Okay. Now I want to read Luke 10:19 in the Passion. Now you understand that I have imparted to you all my authority to trample over his kingdom. You will trample upon every demon before you and overcome every power Satan possesses. Absolutely nothing will be able to harm you as you walk in this authority. You have to walk in the authority. You cannot stop or set down. Okay, so let's look at verse 27. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. He literally waited for them to get in the water, and then he released them and drowned them. In fact, they have found chariot wheels in the Red Sea. Okay. So after all of this, the Lord took them on a circuitous journey with varying tests for the basic needs of life like food and water. This was to prepare them for the things that go beyond need. Did you hear me? Getting needs met is not the promised land, and it will not take territory for his kingdom. It's only in the overflow, the more than enough, that you can establish his covenant in the earth. John 15:5 in the West, if you maintain a living communion with me and my words are at home in you, I command you to ask at once something for yourself, whatever your heart desires, and it will become yours. In this answered desire, my Father is glorified, namely that you are bearing much fruit and you will become my disciples. You see that? Okay, so move beyond need. This is also probably the most crucial part of the process, guys, because if you don't allow him to mold you, you might just die in the wilderness. Okay, so this is a crucial. You've got to get this. And what are you getting? You're getting that God is for you. He is not against you, and he is always good. So if you end up in a predicament, it is not because he's against you. It's because you need to get your rod out and you need to split the sea.
Well, and you know, we were talking about the people that sit back and want God to do everything. And that's really a slave mentality.
It is.
You know, it's not the possessor of the Most High God. It's, you know, I'm sitting back and I'm letting God do everything for me. It's the same mindset as these Israelites had in Egypt.
I think it's a good picture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he led them for 40 years to get them out of that mindset.
And it didn't work.
Well, they had to die off.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that were born into that slave mentality had to die off. And the only ones that got to go on were the ones that did not have slave mentality.
Or the old people that had a different spirit.
So,
Courage.
Anybody that wants to stay in that one spot like that needs to, you know, God will just let you die off.
Yeah, and I think it was like an 11-day journey.
Yeah.
But the wilderness was to prepare them for battle. So you got to understand that. The wilderness is always to prepare you for battle. Okay. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, I'm going to read 1 through 11. And I know it's a lot of scripture, but I really want you guys to see the process as clearly as possible. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud, all passed through the sea, all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea, all ate the same spiritual food, all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. And with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. Now these things became our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things, as they also lusted. What does Peter say? We have escaped the lust that has corrupted. Okay, so we've escaped it, but that doesn't mean that we can't learn, from examples in the Old Testament. Okay, so number 1, don't become idolaters, as some of them were. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. 2, nor let us commit sexual immorality, as some of them did, and in one day 23,000 fell. Number 4, do not let us tempt Christ. You notice he said tempt Christ, as some of them also tempted and were destroyed by serpents. Number 5, don't complain, as some of them also complained and were destroyed by the destroyer. Now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, on whom the ends of the ages have come. Okay, so idolatry is intense craving of things, even those you need, in a way that cause you to despise God's provision and what He's doing. Okay, so they wanted meat instead of manna. That's the lusting. And then idolatry is putting your trust in another person or plan other than God's, or giving up and going back to what you knew before. We know what sexual morality is. Testing, here's the testing of the Lord. Is He among us or not? That's what they asked. And then complaining, of course, invites destruction from the destroyer. God guides you into increased sanctification. Once the Israelites that left Egypt died, this is number 4, I'm sorry. Okay, so now, we've got all hell breaks loose. You find out how jacked up you are, and then you're led into a trap to be a guinea pig. This is a process. Here's number 4, okay? God guides you into now increased sanctification. Okay? Sanctification. Did you hear how I said that? Sanctification. So once the Israelites that left Egypt died, except for Joshua and Caleb, the new generation was ready. But there had to be a deeper consecration, not because that made them more pleasing to God, but because they were about to engage in spiritual and physical battle, and there could not be any landing strip for the enemy to take them out, which he did at the Battle of Ai. Okay? Alright, so it's during this time that motives and quick obedience get tested. Alright, so let's look at Joshua chapter 3. So at this point, they've crossed the Jordan. They're in the Promised Land. And it says in verse 5, and Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. So this is the first one. And then he goes deeper. So they cross over, and it says, so it was, in verse 14, when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the Ark of Covenant before the people, and as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped into the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city which is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, or the Dead Sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite to Jericho. Woohoo! We've made it. And the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firm on the dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over. The promise is fulfilled. We are now in the Promised Land. It is now to go move into those houses.
I don't think so. I don't.
Well,
The Giants in the land.
Well, I think it's important. I think it's interesting that the priest, basically, this is the second time that they crossed over on dry land.
well, only 2 of them.
Well, but it's the second time it happened.
Mhm.
I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was interesting.
But they just dipped at the edge.
Yeah. Well, and here you got the ark, so you know, I don't know if they were still led by the cloud at this point.
No.
It was
No, at
air-
this
ark
point,
at
the
this
manna
point.
had stopped, the cloud and
Right.
the fire all gone. Now it's time to...
So I think it's more or less this ark is getting that same respect, position, whatever. And but it's that same picture of it going on before.
Well, I see two
and then-
things of, you know, how they dip their foot at the edge. So I see two scenarios. Number one, they're like,
Yeah.
you know, I don't know if that was the case. But the other side could be that God was so ready that all they had to do was touch it and bam, you know.
Yeah.
But I would probably be more like, okay, let's just put a toe in. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let's look at verse 5. Chapter 5, verse 1. So it was when all the kings of the Amorites, you need to take note of that name, who were on the west side of the Jordan, and all the kings of the Canaanites who were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of the Jordan from before the children of Israel until we had crossed over, that their heart melted, and there was no spirit in them any longer because of the children of Israel. Now he's becoming world famous. At the time, the Lord said, okay, go ahead and take the land. Wait a minute. What does this say? Make flint knives for yourselves and circumcise the sons of Israel again the second time? Okay, so Joshua made flint knives for himself and circumcised all the sons of Israel at the hill of the foreskins. That's what they named it. And this is the reason why Joshua circumcised them. All the people who came out of Egypt who were males, all the men of war had died in the wilderness on the way after they'd come out. For all the people who had came out had been circumcised, but all the people who were born in the wilderness on the way as they came out of Egypt, they had not been circumcised. For the children of Israel walked 40 years in the wilderness. All the people who were men of war who came out of Egypt were consumed because they did not obey the voice of the Lord, to whom the Lord swore that he would not show them the land which the Lord had sworn to their fathers that he would give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So Joshua circumcised their sons, whom he raised up in their place, for they were uncircumcised because they had not been circumcised. You get the picture? They had to be circumcised because they weren't circumcised. Moses making sure we understand this, and that they had come out of Egypt. So it was, when they had finished circumcising all the people, that they stayed in their places in the camp till they were healed. Then the Lord said to Joshua, this day I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. Therefore, the name of this place is called Gilgal, or rolling, to this day. So the children of Israel camped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at twilight in the plains of Jericho. And they ate the produce of the land on the day after the Passover, unleavened bread and parched grain on the very same day. Now the manna ceased the day after they had eaten the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna, but they ate the food of the land of Canaan that year. Okay, this is where God has to deal with shame. Okay, so he's going to deal with shame. So I just want you to picture the scenario. So, you got all hell has broken loose. You find out your soul is jacked up. What was the next thing? Oh, you get trapped. And then you have to circumcise yourself, right? I obviously am not a male. But I would think that as a man, grown, that'd be a little bit painful.
Ouch.
Right. And we won't go into too many details. But we do know that God put in babies, male babies, on the 8th day they feel less pain than any other day, and that's when he would have them circumcised in the Bible. So anyway, so there's a deeper level of sanctification, which is the rolling off of you shame. And I'm going to show you why. Isn't that neat? I feel like I'm in the rolling off of shame. I feel like that's where I'm at right now. Okay. So he heals your heart at this step of any wounding that causes fractures in your soul. Why? Because the weightiness of promises fulfilled can cause the fractures to widen and spread even to the point of destruction of you as a person, and he just will not allow that. So this is a time when you can feel how close you are to your promise. You can taste it. And yet, out of nowhere, there's a pause. And that pause is for you to focus on your heart condition and to ask God to reveal any areas that need a deeper work. Allow Him to cut away scar tissue that makes you hard, or you can't feel Him very well, or to cut out infection, which can be bitterness and anger that will spread like a disease. Let Him roll away the reproach of your former bondage, whether it was a past sin, failures, disappointments, discouragements, disillusionments, all of that stuff, prison record, divorce, financial failure. It doesn't matter. Whatever is causing you shame, He's going to cut that out. Okay? The word reproach means disgrace, contempt, state of dishonor and low status, scorn and insult. It's shame. Here He shows you the areas that you need to be free from shame, that if you don't deal with, could cause you to mistreat His people, use blessing for your own selfish gain, become prideful, etc., all due to shame. Shame was, we were afraid, and so we hid ourselves. Shame was the first emotion, though. Shame came before fear. Look it up in Genesis. Okay? So you could say, in a way, that fear is rooted in shame. So Saul didn't do this, King Saul. He felt shame because he belonged to the tribe of Benjamin, the smallest due to violent homosexuality that happened before he was even born. And then once he was promoted to king, that shame turned to fear and then jealousy and pride, leading to horrible atrocities committed at his command, and then the eventual death of him and his son. So embrace the pain to remove the shame. Oh, you need to write that down. Embrace the pain to remove the shame. Thanks, Kathy. I almost missed that one. If you could text me that one later, please. She's our scribe.
Embrace the pain to reduce the shame.
Nope, to remove. Wait, to remove the shame. Roll with it. So shame not dealt with becomes the very tool the enemy will use to destroy you and others. Okay, so hopefully this is good news.
Well, you know,
the next step. Let's see. Oh, go ahead, Kathy.
Bill Johnson says that if there's a weakness, when you get that weight of glory from the Lord, it'll split you basically. Because if you're not healed, you know, if you've got a dual nature and a weakness, it'll
split you where the good Lord did not
That's
split you.
Right.
Yes. Yes. All right. Here we go. Last part. Here's the good news. Number 5. You get to fight giants.
Yep.
So this is all. Do you see why some Christians don't last? At any point in the stage or the process, they can think that they're doing something wrong, or God doesn't love them, or why isn't He doing anything? Let me tell you, He has already sat down. He did everything He's going to do. You know what I mean? In a way of speaking. He encourages us. He prays for us. He does all of that. But here's the thing. It's all to get you the point to engage giants, because there are giants in your promised land. So now you become the instrument that God uses to drive them out. Okay? Now, I don't have time and I don't want to distract from the message today, but the main goal of God was to get these Israelites ready to drive out the giants. And that's why, in just a few instances, He literally obliterated entire peoples because they were giants. Now, look in Genesis, because I'm not sure it got all my notes, but look over here in Genesis chapter 15. Oh, I know I did. I took them out because I was afraid it would go too long. Okay, just real fast. In verse 14. No, let's look at 13. So this is where God made a covenant with Abram, and He walked through the pieces. Then He said to Abram, "Know certainly that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them 400 years. And so we know that that's Egypt. And also the nation whom they serve I will judge, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. That's prosperity. Now as for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace, and you'll be buried at a good old age. But in the 4th generation they shall return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. If you look in the Bible, well, let's look at Amos here. I've got it in your notes, 2:9-10. Yet it was I who destroyed the Amorite before them, whose height was the height of cedars, and he was as strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above and his roots beneath. Also it was I who brought you up from the land of Egypt and led you 40 years through the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorite. The Amorite line, they were giants. Okay?
Yep.
And so when he says the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete, he is referring to giants. And they were reproducing. And so their job was to get rid of the giants. Your job is to get rid of the giants. Don't pet your giant. Don't make friends with it. Don't make treaties with it. Obliterate it. Annihilate it. You know, don't coddle it. Whatever your giant is. If it's fear, be ruthless. If it's bitterness, be ruthless. If it's depression, be ruthless. If it's complaining, be ruthless. Whatever it is, you've got to be ruthless and absolutely kill the fruit above ground and get to the roots under. See, a lot of people are trying to chop off the fruit above ground, and they never kill the root system that is producing that thought. Remember the trees in their lives. Your giants are your thoughts. Your giants are those things that are keeping you. But also, if you can take it outside, we are fighting demonic forces that want to hold cities and counties and nations captive. So we have to deal with our giants so that we can deal with those giants. Does that make sense? If you do not deal with fear, then fear will always meet you on the battlefield. If you don't deal with complaining, then it will always meet you on the battlefield. So that's why it's so important. Cut the giant's head off inside you so it doesn't cut your head off in battle. Does that make sense? So anyway, the giants are any defiling demonic entity that prevents the kingdom of God from being established in the earth in your sphere of authority. And I also believe that it can be any defiling influence in your family that prevents the fullness of a generational call. God always thinks generationally. Always, always, always. And so what's sad is a lot of revivals and healing movements and stuff die with that generation. Why? Because they either don't pass it on or they don't deal with their giants and they end up dying prematurely. And then the move dies with them. So, the Promised Land conflict, here's the final thought. Here's the good news. Produces maturity to handle the blessings that come with living in the promises. All battles are won first internally and then externally. And when you take your promised land, you can lead others to theirs. Isn't that good?